Alrighty, CFB Paint back for another episode. It's a man on man. Gosh, what a way to say that. We're doing man coverage. It's single coverage tonight. It's Corey and Steve, and it's just the two of us tonight. And we're not re-recording. We're soldiering through Steve's early
Man
death.
on man.
It does not bode well for the rest of the night. With trust me, it's everything here is appropriate for all ages. Um, well, let's jump into it. We had a couple of topics that we wanted to cover tonight. I think why don't we talk first conference realignment slash the ACC turbulence? We got a question on our Instagram from one of our followers and a friend of the show. So we'll talk about that first. Then we'll talk through the spring portal additions and maybe some news around transfer portal, just the happenings of the transfer portal in this most recent window. And then finally, we'll have a little bit of a discussion around what early win totals we've seen from sportsbooks that maybe have surprised us. And I'll introduce that one a little bit later as we go through it. But yeah, ACC conference meetings took place this last couple of days. I think maybe they wrapped earlier today, actually. Today being the 17th of April, or of May, rather. Wow, time's moving quick. But the story is that there are a multitude of teams that are potentially exploring how ironclad the grant of rights agreement is within the ACC and potentially looking for a new home that might offer a more lucrative broadcasting deal or share of a broadcasting deal of a different conference. Corey, take me through your understanding of what's going on in the ACC. What do you expect to happen, and what's inappropriate? I mean, obviously, we're not journalists here, but based on what we're hearing for our audience, we can kind of relay what people think is an appropriate timeline for some of the things that are likely on the horizon.
So the first day that the ACC met as a conference, news broke out that 7 teams had been meeting to figure out how to break this grant of rights contract, to figure out how they could get out of the ACC. And essentially, it's the problem is not breaking up the ACC. It's the grant of rights that is really what's holding it together. And the fact that they're not going to be able to get as much money as all the other conferences. I mean, the Big 12 just signed a deal, and they're going to be making more per year across the conference than the ACC is. And I think the numbers that Florida State quoted were like 30 million, like less than the SEC even. So, and the Big 12, or Big 10, sorry. So there's a bunch of issues here in the fact that like the ACC is not going to be getting as much money. And I get that they want to break the grant of rights. If you're going to break this grant of rights, you're going to have to have a ton of teams dissolve it, and you have to have teams to find landing places. And with the Big 12 landing such a lucrative contract, and then you have the Big 10 and the SEC, which already have lucrative contracts, if you can find 8 of those teams, 9 of those teams that can move over into one of those places, they're going to be ending up getting more money than they would be in the ACC. And so the incentive is for a lot of people to get out there. I think that's the key, is to break those grant of rights. It's going to be a little difficult. There's got to be some loopholes to figure out how to do it. There was talk in the ACC meetings about splitting the revenues and letting teams that are like a little bit higher up or within the playoffs getting more percentage share, but that's still not going to make up the difference. And so they came out of the ACC meetings saying, we're combined, we're solid. Of course, you have to say that to the face of everybody. And we all know behind closed doors, they are all still looking for a way out. At least the good teams are. The ones that are going to be left out, well, I'm sorry about them, but that's kind of how it works. But yeah, like everybody came out and like, oh yeah, we love the ACC. Of course we love the ACC right now because we're trying to get what we can out of the ACC to give us enough money to be successful. But we're not there permanently. We're going to do what's in our best interest, and Clemson's going to do what's in their best interest, and all those teams are going to do what's in their best interest. And as far as time frame, if you get enough teams working at this, I think you can find a way to break this. And at some point in time, it's going to be worth it. I mean, I don't know how the ACC kind of leverages it to get themselves to be broken up to go where they want. But the ACC is literally on its last pins and needles kind of living.
Yeah, and I think maybe it's helpful for our listeners if we kind of describe like what's at stake here, right? What's going on is you mentioned that $30 million per year deficit, that as far as money coming into ACC schools compared to the SEC and Big Ten, and that's an approximate number. I think it's maybe a little bit higher for the Big Ten in terms of the gap, just because I think their TV deal is slightly larger than the SEC's. But where that becomes significant is that's money that you can invest in your program, right? If I have $30 million more that I can build a larger staff, or pay to hire coaches, I could potentially be paying coordinators at my school more than the ACC could afford to pay a head coach, and so
Well,
it's all
and
of
in the
that
future,
that makes
Steve.
it.
Yeah, keep going. Sorry.
Yeah, and I think we're headed in the same direction here. So it's all things that I can invest, but really, I think the major challenge becomes as college sports becomes more of a profession, or more of a professional sport. Uh, at some point, players are going to be considered employees, and that revenue pool of $30 million more a year is more that you can pay your employees, your players, to attend your university and be part of that team. So that's where it's really problematic for those teams in the ACC that are hoping to compete at the highest levels. And so that, I think, that kind of sets the stage as to why there's a lot of rumblings and some discontent among groups that are invested in trying to compete at the highest levels, and others that are keen to maintain the status quo, and aren't really hoping to. They're comfortable with a football team that has a losing record, provided it's continuing to generate revenue for the school. So I think that kind of details why there's angst on both sides, and why there's some that are eager to hold it together, and there are others that are really itching to break it up. And so, kind of like you mentioned, Corey, just the last thing I'll give some background with our viewers is, like, that grant of rights. What that means is that when a school leaves, because that grant of rights exists, any revenue associated with their broadcasting rights would belong to the conference that they've left, the ACC, rather than with that school. So that's the real challenge and the real hurdle that needs to be cleared. And what looks like right now, the easiest way potentially to sort of circumvent that would be to get more than 50% of the league to agree to dissolve, and then that grant of rights just goes away. So that's what is kind of the latest news, is that 7 universities have at least explored that. The tipping point would be 8, and not just 8 exploring it, but 8 actually electing to dissolve the conference. And so I think we're a ways out from that.
I think
But in
I
my
think the thing is
estimation, go
oh,
ahead.
go ahead, Steve. I think the timing is, in reality, is like, can 8 teams find landing places? And you got to find places that are like teams that are going to go up to the Big Ten and up to the whatever, up to the SEC, and then teams that are going to kind of do a little bit of a lateral move and go to the Big 12. But then you're going to have teams that aren't going to have that places. And I think people want to end up higher than they think they are, or think they're better than they think they are. I mean, you have Florida State, Miami, Duke, North Carolina. You have a bunch of these teams that, like, which tier do they end up in, and which tier should they be in, and their viewpoint of where they should be, and where the other conferences view that they should be may not align. And then you also have the fact that the Big Ten has that high academic standard as well that they may have to lower in some of these schools. I think it's in the Big Ten's best interest to start getting into the SEC's backyard and start taking teams in the backyard of the SEC and bringing in those viewership from that area in a heartbeat. If I'm the Big Ten, I open my doors up. Same with the Big 12. We've already got some teams over there. We've got, UCF. We are the most expansive conference across almost the United States. I would open the doors for those lesser teams in a heartbeat, because I can expand the markets. But that means more revenue sharing. So who knows?
Yeah, it's a really challenging thing to sort out. Obviously, there's lots of people trying to figure out where they fit in. I think it's one of those things that, in my estimation, the the ACC is dead. Let's call it what it is. It's dead. It's actually been dead for a while. This agreement that they have currently with their own broadcasting deal, I think that was signed in 2008. And it went to 2036 with no option to renegotiate. And so that's really at the core of this, is that They've got a deal with ESPN that heavily favors ESPN. They aren't able to renegotiate and move that number up. And for those that are happy with that amount of money and aren't comparing it to other conferences and their peers in other conferences, that's fine. But for those, again, Michael Alford, the athletic director at Florida State, has been one that's been constantly beating the drum of we can't compete against, the University of Florida. And heck, in a few years, the University of Central Florida, which just joined the Big 12, will be out-earning Florida State, a more traditional power in football. So that's really where I think this is headed, is this thing is going to dissolve at some point. The question is when. I don't think anything's imminent. I think some of the news that came out in the last 48 hours, a lot of people took that and ran with it. That kind of felt like it was going to dissolve in the immediate future. I don't believe that's the case, but if you were to tell me that the ACC, as it's currently constituted, exists in 2028, I don't believe that. So I think that things are happening behind the scenes that I don't know if it'll move quite as fast as the Oklahoma to the SEC, Oklahoma and Texas to the SEC, and UCLA and USC to the Big Ten. But I think there's this last domino to fall. Once the ACC dissolves, or a couple of the major players are somehow able to separate themselves from the conference, I think we'll start to find a more stable environment, at least for a bit. I mean, I guess there's also some chatter around what's going on with the Pac-12's media deal, but all that to say, I think the ACC doesn't have really long-term viability, and I don't expect anything immediate to happen. But if you were to ask me, I would imagine that a significant portion of those teams, particularly those that are either traditional football powers or happen to have very large fan bases, so a couple of North Carolina, for example, I don't anticipate them being in the ACC in the long term moving forward. So
over or under 3 years before the ACC disbands?
I think it'll be announced in 3 years. I don't think it will maybe have taken place. That's a good question. I don't know. Again, I don't have any, I'm not a journalist. I don't have any sources on this, but the way that I've read it described is basically the situation is untenable. For those that are wanting to compete at the highest levels, and particularly in football, which drives the revenue for these conferences, they're just going to have to find a way to challenge that, even if it means ponying up a significant large lump sum of money now, borrowing. I heard it suggested that the state universities could potentially borrow from the state and pay that back over, 20 to 30 years, which is an interesting idea. And probably would make sense. I think that would probably be something that they could probably make happen.
I'll be honest. I'll get on a different high horse here. Like,
sure.
Investing within within your country and your states, and within the companies within your states. I think governments should be doing that so that they can have other types of funds. This is an opportunity to get interest from big company or big companies, big schools. I think it's a great idea to do that. I think under 3 years, it's started to move that direction 100%. I would say if we haven't had a team leave within under 3 years, I'd be very surprised.
I think it'll be announced. I don't know if it'll actually have happened yet, where the team is actually now in a separate conference for the next 3 years.
Yeah, I don't know how quickly they'll be allowed, but I think teams will be like, you know what, we're paying our grant rights, like our $500 million to get out. All right, peace.
Yeah, it's wild times for sure. And thanks to Kyle for reaching out and kind of asking for our take on that. Hopefully that was helpful. Let's go ahead and shift gears. The other big thing that's kind of happened in the sport, where it feels like, there used to be kind of this quiet period after spring football and prior to fall camp, where that's where, for me, those were the longest days of summer. Now, thankfully, for those of us that are college football junkies, like, there's been other tidbits for us to kind of consume during that time. One of them being this spring transfer portal window. And I think leading into it, a lot of people didn't really know what to expect, because I think this is the first year where they've had that specific window where where players can enter the transfer portal. It's only 14 days, so there's a small period of time where players can submit to enter the transfer portal. Once they're in there, they can take as much time as they need to select a new destination, select a new school. But I think I was expecting it to be pretty chaotic, and by and large, there's a few exceptions, but by and large, I think it was much calmer and tamer than most people expected.
Yeah, the way some teams kind of approached this portal, it looked like some people were banking on it, thought it would be a lot more like a lot of people hitting the portal. There weren't as many people hitting the portal as there have been in the past, or as much quality maybe that's hitting the portal as there has been in the past. But some teams definitely dominated and filled their needs, and some teams got beat by the portal, and some teams just became completely new teams by the portal.
Yeah, maybe we start there. I mean, there's been a lot of chatter around Colorado and them essentially overhauling that entire roster within about 9 months of Deion Sanders arriving as head coach in Boulder. I don't know. I've looked at it, and I think I've got two major thoughts. Right, like number one, I have not scouted every single player that they picked up or that they encouraged to enter the transfer portal over the last 9 months or so. But one thing that was really interesting to me is like looking at a lot of the players that they're bringing in are players from Division 1 schools that are either contributors or are early in their collegiate football careers that at least some of them have shown some promise. And so, like, we're fans of Florida State. I think a lot's been made of, I think it's now 5 transfers from Florida State to Colorado. And, having known our roster pretty well, I think you got 4 guys that will probably contribute and maybe a 5th, but I think at least 4 that can help. I mean, Colorado was a 1-11 team. It wasn't like they were lighting the world on fire. So if you get just capable Division 1 players, you're probably improving your roster for the most part. But really interesting to see them go kind of like almost full scorched earth and just say, you know what, we are building this. They were tearing it down to the studs and building it from the ground up.
Yeah, the approach is very interesting in the fact that like we've seen coaches that have come into new positions trying to rebuild through the portal, and they've kind of done it a little bit slower. I mean, I think Florida State took like 19 guys over 2 years. I think Miami took like close to 20 something guys over a few years. We've never seen a team bring in 45, 48 kids this fast. The one thing that Deion won't be able to say is like, oh, these aren't my kids. These are the kids that don't want to play for me. Because there are some coaches that have done that and be like, well, said, please come pick up your kid. I'm making a reference to Mario Cristobal, of course. Please come pick up your kid. He's terrible. I didn't recruit him. I don't want him on my team. But these guys have been picked by Deion, or he's let them stay on the team. He's not going to be able to say that at all. I've been probably not very large. I've been pretty vocal about not being a super fan of Deion, and I don't think he's a quality coach in particular. But there's no denying the fact that he has the kind of the draw to bring in some kids, and I think that we have a good chance to see how successful this will be. If anything, he is paving a new path for potentially rebuilding a team and potentially going from nothing to at least something, and having an opportunity to build on that. Like, it's kind of a cool opportunity to see this, and I agree. Like, this is not the bottom of a Pac-12 team; it's probably a middling Pac-12 team now, which would be significantly better. Now, to kind of get off our path a little bit, I mean, their projected win total is 3 for next year. I think they'd win more than 3 games, but that's just me. And that's something we're going to talk about. Like, because I agree, you're bringing in contributors. You're not bringing maybe the top talent of everywhere. I mean, you brought in your previous talent for Jackson State, but you're bringing in good guys, like guys that were in their early years or they were contributors to their team. So, yeah, I think he's going to be at least a much better team than he was. And at least you have players that want to play.
Yeah, the thing that I think surprises me is just the number of departures that took place after spring football. One of the things that we've seen a lot of coaches prioritize is taking in transfers that could then spend spring football with their program and kind of have basically a full 6-7 months at their new location heading into a new season. So it was interesting to like spring football, and then they had this mass exodus of players, and so I don't know how useful spring football was to the University of Colorado Buffaloes, but again, I think they've got some quality players. They it's going to be interesting. I'm excited to see what Colorado football can do with that. Um, so one might consider them a winner in that they've been able to overhaul their roster. Again, we can look at some of the quality, and there's some players that have some significant production, but there's others that maybe are kind of newer to college football that for whatever reason didn't work out at their first stop a year or two in. But I wanted to just highlight there really wasn't, in my opinion, a bigger loser in the spring transfer portal than Michigan State, which already was coming off of a season where they lost, where they didn't make a bowl game, and then they lost their starting quarterback. Now, it sounds like, based on what I've read from other journalists and publications, that he was probably in a pretty tight battle for that starting quarterback job once again. So I don't know if it's a slam dunk that he would have been the starter, but nonetheless, he was a 2-year starter at Michigan State, had a lot of experience and some production. I won't claim he's a superstar by any stretch, but Peyton Thorne goes to Auburn, and then their leading receiver from last year, Keon Coleman, entered the transfer portal. Both of them entered, by the way, on the last day of the portal. So I would imagine if I was the head coach or on the staff of any university, you're probably just sweating it out for these 14 days to see, like, am I going to be able to keep my players? And they were so close to the finish line and end up losing their starting quarterback and their leading wide receiver, who just today, again, we're recording this on April 17th, announced that he's going to Florida State. And I don't know. I can't think of a worse situation than to realize that the very last day that the portal window is open, I'm losing two of my more experienced players on a team that still was below 500. Mel Tucker, how does he circle the wagons, Corey?
He doesn't. He packs it in and gets. He enjoys the lucrative contract he has, and he just rides it off into the sunset.
I've told you my dream job, like, obviously doing this full time would be a dream job for me. But my second dream job, and actually probably my more dream job, would be to be a head coach in college football anytime after about 2017 and get fired. That is the life. And Michigan State, for those, like, the reason I joke about this with Mel Tucker specifically, I think his contract is $90 million in 9 years or something like that. It's a lot. I don't know exactly what it is, but that buyout would be a ton. I don't think he's getting fired this year. Let me make that clear. But he's definitely facing an uphill climb right now after having a poor sophomore effort there, a great first season, but a poor sophomore effort, and now losing some of his team leaders right at the 11th hour of this spring portal window.
It feels almost as if those players kind of snuck out and didn't really want the coaches staff to really know that they were leaving, like, a little bit. That's kind of how it feels a little bit.
That's exactly how I felt about it. It's like, yeah, they kind of just snuck out in the dead of night. I don't know if there were conversations that happened before that. Maybe there were, but I got the sense that it was kind of this exodus. And I say exodus, it was really two players. They did have a starting corner also enter the portal, but then withdrew and opted to stay at Michigan State. But that is a tough hand to be dealt. Yeah, that's a tough hand to be dealt right at the end of that portal window, because now you're stuck with whatever else is in the transfer portal to replace that production.
Yeah, I think what you do have an opportunity, though, is you have an opportunity to kind of just start over a little bit. You have a new quarterback who was nipping at the heels of Thorne, and kind of like giving him a run for his money. Now, there was a reason Keon Coleman moved away. He wanted a better quarterback, and so if Noah Kim's about equal, maybe that's the case. But there's so many times that people get the quarterback position and who to start wrong. Maybe this Noah Kim guy can spark their team and move them in the right direction. And in reality, I mean, we can see he had a great first campaign, like you said. We'll see where 1 or 2 years ago, and see if they have enough patience to see if he can right the ship. Because there's a reason they hired him. I mean, in reality, and he's a good defensive mind. So,
yeah, Yeah, I remember being a fan of the hire going into it. Just Mel Tucker, a longtime defensive coordinator at Georgia. Obviously worked with Kirby Smart for a while there. Had one season as the head coach at Colorado, and then on to Michigan State. So we'll see if he can right the ship. But as of right now, I don't know if there's a whole lot of Spartan faithful that's feeling super hopeful or eager for the season to start with some late defections in this transfer portal window. I guess the last thing I had on that, we kind of mentioned it, but I figure we'll talk about it. Obviously, we're Florida State fans. Keon Coleman goes to FSU, adds another weapon to what was already a very productive offense. So over this last couple of, and I'll just focus just on the transfers at this point, but you've got two transfer tight ends that are both expected to contribute right away. A quarterback, or not a quarterback, excuse me, a wide receiver now that could potentially be wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2. Again, 800 yards in the Big Ten last season. Coupling that with their returning production that they had at wide receiver, again, Johnny Wilson, 900 plus yards receiving last year. Matchup problem with both his size and how well he moves at that size. Man, it's hard to not be excited about what the offense can do at Florida State in 2023.
It's hard not to be excited about that. They have sufficient depth, but that depth is not necessarily proven as much as it could be. You potentially have 2 to 3 starters that haven't started with your team and haven't had cohesiveness. Cohesiveness. I don't know if I said that right, but haven't had that chance to gel. So that would be where my question mark with this team is. To think about that team though, and think about how many of these players are transfers. Literally, if you go look at the starting lineup, you might have 2 originally recruited players. Everybody else is a transfer. Your quarterback, Jordan Travis, is a transfer. Your running back is a transfer. Your top 2 receivers are a transfer. Your third receiver, if it's Winston Wright, he's a transfer. If it's Kentron Portier, that's when you were actually recruited. And then you look across the offensive line, you have Maurice Smith, the center, who is a recruit. And then you have one of the tackles, Robert Scott, and then the backup tackle, Washington. Those are your original recruits. Everybody else is a transfer. Your guards are transfers. Your other tackles are transfer. Your backup other tackle is a transfer. I mean, like, it's just unreal that this is a transfer team that was built on transfers, and the fact that they gelled as much as they did last year. We'll see if they can continue it. I think that is a little bit scary that you have to get players to buy into that culture. But I mean, if that offensive line is as good as they should be, this is going to be a wicked and scary defense or scary offense. I am sad to see the new rules that playing where the clock doesn't stop after first downs. I think that will temper scoring and temper, like, we won't see as big blowouts and stuff like that. And so start betting the under a lot more often than you did. And it won't be fun to see offenses that can explode like that not be able to do it full time. We're going to see a lot more NFL scores like 35 instead of 42, 49. And I like the 42 and 49s. I like the 63s, man.
Yeah, I guess I hadn't thought about it from that perspective in terms of, like, total points will probably be reduced some, but I'm interested to see. They said that they think it will only shave off about 7 plays. So, which to me, at face value, feels like that's a very low estimate.
I 100% agree.
Yeah, I think that it would end up being more that gets removed from a game. So I don't know where they got that or how they arrived at that number, but you're right. I think, again, going back to kind of where we started this conversation, I think Florida State's going to be an exciting team. Obviously, Mike Norvell is known for putting up points. Watching some of his teams at Memphis were really entertaining. They had a lot of skill players that ended up being in the pros, and they averaged north of 40 points, I think, 3 straight years. So he's a guy that knows when he has the right tools available, he knows how to utilize them to generate points and to win games. So I think Florida State fans, and that consists of a fair amount of our audience, that they're riding high right now. They're feeling like this is building to something pretty special in 2023, and we'll have to see what comes of that. Now, Last thing that we wanted to kind of take a walk through. We've kind of alluded to it a couple different times. Oh, go ahead. Yeah,
I just want to talk about two other teams that I think are winners in this
fire
transfer
away.
portal.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think we kind of see this a little bit with new coaches. They also become winners because they can attract the talent. They're shiny. It sometimes happens with the recruiting class, but like sometimes it takes a little bit longer to get that recruiting class to like tweak out and they or to fully flesh itself out because they come in at they're hired in December and then all of a sudden like the class is supposed to be or over in like a week or two after they're hired. You have the
Sure.
early signing period, and what we're seeing from these coaches is they are really shiny in the spring portal and right after the season ends. And so I'm looking at like Jeff Brom at Louisville. I mean, they pulled Keith Brown, the linebacker from Oregon. They've got Cam Kelly from the safety from North Carolina, and then Marcus Washington, a cornerback from Georgia. Like they loaded up on players from good quality schools. Now, not necessarily starters at everywhere, but they brought in a bunch of quality depth that people want to go to this new shiny object. I look at Auburn. Auburn with Hugh Freeze is going to be way better than I expected them to be. At least way better than they would have been had they kept in their current situation. Hugh Freeze is a nice new shiny person, and he's got. Sorry, I'm looking for my notes on this one. He's got a lot of new transfers. He picked up Peyton Thorne from Michigan State, and then Caleb Burton, the wide receiver from Ohio State, and who else? He's got Jaden Muskrat, offensive lineman from Tulsa, and the outside linebacker from Appalachian State, Jalen McLeod. But it's interesting to me to watch these new coaches, and that's a quick way to affect your locker room and affect your change. Deion's doing it. Auburn's doing it. We're seeing, whoever I just mentioned, Jeff Brom doing it. So, like, these coaches, that is a quick way to transform your entire locker room and get you moving in the right direction. If you can't capitalize on that, I think that sets you up for failure potentially as a head coach nowadays.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think the timeline for showing success on the field is sped up quite a bit. I mean, when you have Sonny Dykes come in and go to the national championship game in year one, that's part of it. Now, I don't think they were super heavy on the transfer portal. I think that was mostly just a change was needed, a change of scenery or a change of perspective from the coaching staff, like working with those players. I think that re-energized that locker room. But yeah, I think your point is well taken in that, if I'm a player that's doing well and it sounded like based on what I heard from most of those players, they're going to a school that would be considered an upgrade. And I don't mean any disrespect to any of the other programs, but you mentioned a linebacker from Appalachian State going to Auburn would be considered an upgrade. And I think part of that, the allure is that, look, Auburn's not where it's supposed to be. Otherwise, I wouldn't be a new coach. They wouldn't have fired the coach that was here before. You're going to have the opportunity to play for a name brand, to increase your own profile, and the competition to get on the field is likely lower than it typically would be at Auburn because I'm here. Like, I wouldn't be here if everything was going swimmingly. And I think the same is true at Louisville. Louisville, you didn't mention one that I think is an under the radar. Kevin Coleman went to Jackson State. He was a really high profile recruit. Was likely choosing between Florida State, Miami, and a couple of others before Deion, and with his exceptional recruiting chops, convinced him to go to Jackson State. He had pretty low numbers there at Jackson State, but was just a true freshman. I think he had about, I think it was just south of 300 yards receiving at Jackson State. But Jeff Brom knows what to do with weapons, and that one's one that I think is a sneaky good pickup and one that could potentially pay dividends sooner rather than later.
Oh, and if you watched him towards the end of their season, that's when he started to pick up. He started to
Yeah,
outpace Travis. What's the other guy's name? The cornerback.
Travis Hunter. Yeah.
There you go. He started out outpace Travis Hunter as far as a wide receiver goes in those last two games. So now Travis Hunter might have been double teamed, but
Yeah. No, I just think it was a sneaky good pickup, and Brom is an offensive guy who has generated points and did really good things at Purdue. I think he's going to be able to get better talent to Louisville, and that's an exciting one. So thanks for slowing my roll before we move on. No, it's going to be a fun year. It's kind of a new thing with the transfer portal again having windows, and this spring one again maybe wasn't quite as hectic as many expected, but Still some moving and shaking going on, and with that, like that's kind of the final opportunity by and large. I guess there's grad transfers still, but now that rosters are somewhat set, there maybe again some of those players in the portal maybe haven't selected their destinations yet, but by and large, most of the rosters are, I think, close to finalized within a few players of being at that 85 scholarship limit. Let's talk about early, futures, and futures we mean like sportsbooks can put out how many regular season wins they anticipate a team having in this upcoming season. And let's just jump out and talk about some of these that looked to me suspect, or to me as ones that were a little bit surprising. And I want to lead and preface this with those longtime listeners of the show know that ahead of each season we do a win totals draft where we'll actually draft teams, and based on their total number of wins over the season, we declare a winner and a loser. And I was that loser this past year.
And
but
I was the winner.
Yeah, so you got the upper bound and the lower bound here on this two-man episode of the pod. But I figured we set the cap at only looking at win totals that are 6 or under. So I don't want to reveal any of my strategy, certainly not that it would really much be taken seriously given how poorly I did this past year. But also for Corey, who did excellent, I don't want to burn any of his thoughts with regards to the higher win totals. So we'll leave those be. But anything under 6 wins jump out at you as either too high or even perhaps too low, Corey?
I don't mind just moving through this list a little bit and talking about teams that I think are interesting to me. So starting from the bottom, Wake Forest. We're going to see a significant step back now that Sam Hartman's gone. I'm interested to see how significant it is, and it looks like Vegas is right there in line with that. Like that might be back to old Wake Forest where they might make a bowl.
See, and I don't see this one. Let's go through this real quick. Okay, Wake Forest schedule. Let's just play a quick wins and losses. Okay, they play Elon.
Okay, win.
That's a win. Yeah. Vanderbilt at home.
Win.
That's a win. At Old Dominion.
You never know with those ACC teams in Old Dominion, but
that's true. But look at Old Dominion's even lower on this list, so I'm saying that's a win. Yeah. Then they have the Georgia Tech.
Oh, yeah. Georgia Tech's
got a win.
ACC team.
I've got them winning that game because remember, Mitch Griffis, the new quarterback, played at the start of this last season because Sam Hartman had an injury, or not even an injury, a medical condition. I can't remember exactly what it was. I think it was some sort of,
you're right.
Was it a growth? I don't remember. Right. He had some sort of medical condition that they thought would have him out almost indefinitely. He ended up only missing a couple of games, but Mitch Griffis looked sharp. Like they didn't lose a beat. So I don't think they're going to take quite the step back that others do. Obviously, they lose A.T. Perry, their leading receiver from last year, who's now on to the NFL. But all right, Georgia Tech, I've got to win. So I've got 4-0 heading into a bye week, and then they go on the road at Clemson.
Yeah, which is obviously
2 weeks to prepare. Okay, you're calling that a loss. I think it's a loss, but like I'm not saying it's a definite loss.
It's not going to be the shootout it was last year.
Probably true. Then they're on the road again at Virginia Tech,
which I think is a possibility. I think I'm at 3.5 wins. I'll put them at 4 on that one.
Okay, I've got them winning that game too. I don't think Virginia Tech's going to be any good. Home against Pitt, that'll be a dogfight.
Yeah, I'm going to call it an L, I think.
Okay, home against Florida State.
Yeah, an L.
I that one to me, I got to see it from Florida State before I'm willing to completely concede that. But like I think that's a winnable game. I don't think I expect them to do it, but that one's not a slam dunk for Florida State either. The next week they're at Duke.
Yeah, and Mike Elko's teams lately have been okay and interesting.
He's good.
And they've got
good.
They have one of the best returning quarterbacks that's unheralded in ACC, in my opinion. So
I agree. I love Riley Leonard. But winnable, right?
I'll give it a half there. So I'm at what am I at? 4.5?
4.5. I think I'm already at 5.5.
Yeah, I think you are.
NC State at home.
Yeah, I don't think they beat NC State. I think NC State takes a step back, but I don't think they're worse than Wake Forest.
Okay, at Notre Dame.
Yeah, another loss.
Okay, and then at Syracuse.
Man, I think that ends up being a probably win
I got the
based off
win.
series.
So I think I've got him over.
You're 6.5,
Um,
and I'm at 5.5. Is
I'm
that right?
6.5, and even then, like that was me not saying like I'm not conceding necessarily the Pitt game and the NC State game at home. I think that they have a puncher's chance in
Yeah.
those games, but I think they're pretty comfortably at 6.5, maybe 7.
So
So
yeah,
that one's
I
surprisingly
think
low.
that line's about right now. Looking at it, I'm like, okay, that line seems okay.
I think it's low. This is not gambling advice. I'm going to just uh, cover us because
Yeah, exactly.
if you listen to me and you did like the George Costanza do the opposite, you'd come out with fistfuls of cash.
That's
But
true.
in my estimation, that one seems low. Sorry, let's keep going. We
Yeah,
don't have to
I'm
do that
looking
with
through
every
this.
team.
Stop me if there's a team that you think that we should talk about. Maybe Florida's my
Uh,
next one I want to talk about.
let's talk about Florida.
I think 5.5 is a realistic line. I wonder if they don't hit the 6, how long Billy Napier stays. I don't think Billy Napier is a bad coach. I don't think I just, but I think that fan base is a little over exuberant, and may set them up for failure. The one thing that they may have going for them, and it's interesting to see this, I think Miami and Florida may have going for this, is that we just watched Florida State suck for 3 years, and then all of a sudden everybody expects them to compete for an ACC title, potentially go to the playoffs. Like, why can't we do the same? And so I think Norvell, in a way, has bought time for Mario Cristobal and Billy Napier. And so I think it'll be interesting to see where they end up.
I think the contracts also bought them time first, but for sure they have the blueprint of like don't abandon ship too quickly, otherwise you might lose out on a good thing.
Yeah.
I'm right there with you. That 5.5 seems about right. I that one's one I don't know. I could like I've gone through their schedule 2 or 3 times already this offseason and said like I could see them winning 8 games, and I could also see them winning only 4. Like I feel like there's a pretty significant the spectrum of what's possible for the Florida Gators in 2023 to me, I think is broader this year than it has been in a while because I don't know what kind of quarterback play you're going to get, and even if it's just consistent, that might, as stupid as this may sound, it might be an upgrade from the really really highs and the really really lows of Anthony Richardson. But that one's interesting.
Um, I remember Mark at the beginning of last year talking about how amazing Anthony Richardson was as a quarterback. And then we watched him kind of like do this up and down thing. I'm going to tell you, like, I think you're going to have marginally better quarterback play than Anthony Richardson's lows, in my opinion. I don't think these quarterbacks are any good. I don't think they're that great. Billy Napier says they evaluated all the quarterbacks and they took the one they wanted. I don't think that's true. And watching that spring game, I'm not, and the fact that they haven't picked up another quarterback, I am not convinced that this team can win if they have to rely on a quarterback. Now, if they can sit there and just run the damn ball, and the coach has the patience to just call plays like that, if Billy Napier calls the plays right, they got a chance because that running team, that offensive line and those running backs are legit, and
Really good.
those
running backs are
those
excellent.
7 players can keep them in a game, in reality, and it's just a matter of if your coach doesn't blow it. Like I feel like I believe Sarkisian's kind of like that. Sarkisian will occasionally lose you a game due to his coaching. Mario Cristobal will occasionally lose you a game due to his coaching, just because of his strategy. I don't really know Billy Napier. I haven't looked at him extensively, so I don't know if he's lost a game due to his coaching. He lost
I think he's a very good in-game tactician.
and
So
if that's the case, then I think I think they beat that 5.5, and you run the damn ball the whole damn time.
yeah, I do. I'm maybe not as bullish on their offensive line as you might be, but like their running back tandem is. I mean, there's a few others in the country. Like Michigan jumps out at me as one that immediately would have something to say about it, but
Right.
there's not that many running back tandems that are quite what the Florida Gators have. So
Yeah. They
if you
didn't
can get,
significantly decrease their offensive line from last year, did they?
they have 2 guys transfer to Southern Cal. One's in the NFL. I think they return
So the answer is yes, they did.
only 1 or 2 starters. So
I
that's
believe
the
in
part
Philly
where
this year with
it's an
that.
unknown. It's an unknown. It's not, it's not necessarily that it is worse, but I'd have a hard time imagining it's better right from the word go.
I agree.
Also,
Yeah.
just a bear of a schedule where they've got opening on the road in Salt Lake.
Are we
I
going
am
to that
tempted
game?
to look at what. I was just saying, like, I'm tempted to look at what tickets are there. It'll be
I
the
looked. They're reasonable.
most fun I'll have around a bunch of Utah fans.
Go root for Micah Pittman for once last time.
That's there you go. Yeah, I remember my wife. Again, we're both BYU alum for listeners, but like last year when they played Florida, I obviously was rooting for Utah because I'm a Florida State fan, and just like the look of disdain she gave me when I was like doing the chant with the band, the "Let's go Utah." Like I don't know what the hand motions are. I don't know what I was just doing there, but that's how it goes. That's kind of the beat. And she's like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "My job." like,
Sleep on the couch tonight.
all right, let's keep it rolling.
Yeah, I'm BYU 5.5. BYU always plays to the level of their competition, but when they're expected to lose, they play better than when they are expected to win, in my opinion. So I think they end up getting to a bowl game. I think that's probably a little bit low. I know they're in the Big 12. I know it's a lot of travel, but for BYU, I mean, one of the most traveled teams in the last 5 years since they went independent. That's not a big deal to them, and they play well in new places. I think in the last 5 years, 4 or 5 years, historically they're not great against Power Five, but in the last 5 years, I think they're like 60% win against Power Five. So it's like that tells me that they shouldn't be that they're on the Power Five level. We watched them go toe to toe with Baylor 2 years in a row. Like they'll get there. They'll get the 6 wins, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'll quickly read off this because I don't know if we need to go through it like every single one, but they play at home against Sam Houston, really good FCS program, but making the jump to FBS. So we'll see. Southern Utah, at Arkansas, at Kansas, home against Cincinnati Bearcats, then a bye week. Yeah, that one's kind of I think a toss up. A bye
I think
week.
it'd be interesting to see Cincinnati travel west. That'll be the one thing. It's like teams that go west struggle sometimes.
Yeah. Then a bye week. Then on the road at TCU. I think that's a loss pretty comfortably. Oh wow. Home against Texas Tech.
Yeah,
No,
I
I
mean,
think I'm very bullish on what the Red Raiders could be. I love Joey Maguire. Just that's my coach. Um, buy stock in Joey Maguire now.
yeah. For the record, Steve has sent us like gifs and videos of Joey Maguire, so he's not just bullshitting for this
I'm a
podcast.
big fan. I think that guy is awesome. So I don't think that one's great. At Texas, not a chance. Uh,
That could
at
be when Sarkisian loses. You never know.
Yeah, yeah, it would be a classic Sark. At West Virginia. Now, ordinarily, I think the Mountaineers, that's a tough road game. It's a long way to travel all the way out to West Virginia. But I think it's far enough in the season they may have already fired their coach and their fan base may have checked out. So I think that one's probably a win. Iowa State, I think that one you can feel pretty good about. Home against Oklahoma, not a chance. At Oklahoma State, I have no idea what Oklahoma State's going to be. I don't think it's going to be anything good. So I've got 1, 2, 3. Yeah, I'm sitting. I think they might get that over.
Yeah, it'll be close. I think they beat teams that they shouldn't beat. Like I think they beat a Texas or a TCU or an Oklahoma, one of those three. But I also think they lose games that like a Kansas or an Iowa State.
Yeah. There'll be some surprises along the way. They quietly had a pretty good portal save of their own. I don't know if you know about this, but Cody Epps, one of their leading receivers,
Yeah.
jumped in the portal and then ended up deciding to stay at BYU. I think that was a low key, a pretty big get.
I don't think that was a low key. People out here were panicking.
Oh yeah. But
Maybe
I
across
think it fell
national
under the national radar. Like
didn't pick
that's
it
a
up.
guy.
Yeah.
Like to give you an example, like again, I would take that guy on Florida State's roster. Like if he would have stayed in the portal, I would have been like, we probably ought to pursue that guy. He'd be a really good addition out of the slot.
Yeah, he's a great guy, and he breathed.
Quality player.
he really said like 3 days before that, like he bleeds BYU, and then he jumped to the portal, and everybody was like, "What the crap?"
Oh no, I didn't follow all of that saga super closely, but that was a big keep for them, I think. Next team on this list, you correct me if I'm wrong. Arizona State and Arizona. Should we talk about the two of them? Arizona State had a really awful year. They also were heavy in the portal, but not a terrible win total of 5. Like I think that would be considered a win in year one for Dilly Dilly.
I am excited to watch Dilly control a team. Like he's been in places where he's been like with Norvell, he wasn't really allowed to call the plays as much. With Oregon, he was allowed to call the plays, but he had Bo Nix again. So this will be like not completely in your comfort zone. Like you're running the team, but I think what he's selling is a great idea. Like you want to be a legend, you want to be incredible. Stay here in Arizona State, make your money from like the community. Open up a car dealership if you're not great. That's what the pitch he's kind of been giving everyone, and he's bringing everybody home. And then he picks up the Florida quarterback that debacle. What was
Rashada.
That? Yeah, Jalen Rashada. I mean, like that kid was rated high for a reason, and yeah, just because there was a debacle that happened with UF, like doesn't mean his talent was decreased, but maybe like teams kind of shied away from him a little bit, and since they already had their quarterback, so thank you for that. I mean, Arizona State's got a good chance to go over, I think.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm ready to call them over just yet, but I mean they got some decent pieces. I think the big thing that they did is they flipped that QB room in a hurry. Well, last year they were starting Emory Jones, who, no disrespect, he was just not a quality player at the Division One level at QB.
Where did he go?
Basically got Dan Mullen fired.
Did he go to Cincinnati?
I can't remember. I think that's right. Yeah,
I think Cincinnati.
And he's at Cincinnati, and that fits with Scott Satterfield's system there. So that might be something where they can make something happen. But yeah, just wasn't. I don't know. Like Emory Jones wasn't anything special. They brought in a few different players to compete for that job. I really don't know who's going to start. I think there's some smoke that Rashada could potentially be the starter as a true freshman. But you also have Drew Pine, a serviceable player from Notre Dame. Again, I don't think he's a world beater, but they also brought in Jacob Conover from BYU, right? Who was who's a really solid player. Happened to be behind an NFL draft pick in Jaron Hall. Like that BYU QB room for the last little bit has been really, really stacked. So the fact that you haven't made the field at BYU is nothing. That's not a black mark on your resume necessarily. Like so.
Yeah, if he hadn't left, I don't think they would have brought in Ken Slovis though either.
I think you're right. I think he would have just been your starter. So, we'll see who ends up starting there. But I think there's some opportunity for them. Arizona sitting at 5 to me feels that feels like easy money. I think that's an over.
Okay.
Give me a reasoning. And I'll tell you what.
Yeah, give me your reasoning.
Number one, they're a decent team, right? They have Jaden DeLora, the previous quarterback at Washington State. They obviously lost one of their wide receivers to USC and Dorian Singer, but they have, I hope I'm saying this name right, Tate Roa McMillan. It was a true freshman last year, went for like 800 yards, and is a bona fide superstar at wide receiver. Jed Fish, I love him as an offensive play caller. And they've got a fairly navigable schedule. Now, a road game against Mississippi State, that's not ideal. But you're also getting Mississippi State that's changing out of an air raid team and going to a more pro-style offense. How's that going to work? How's, goodness, I'm blanking their quarterback's name, Rogers. Eli Rogers? Am I getting that wrong? I can't remember their quarterback's first name. But how does he fit in that at a different system other than Mike Leach's? I don't know, but so they've got other out-of-conference games, Northern Arizona, UTEP, at Stanford, I think that's a win. Home against Washington, probably not. At USC, probably not. At Washington State, maybe not. I'm not sure. Then you get a bye week, and then you host Oregon State. The Beavers, tough game, but you do get it at home and off a week's rest. Then you host UCLA. Then you're at Colorado. I think that's a win. At Arizona State, I think is a win. You host Utah. Oh, sorry, I read those out of order. At Colorado, host Utah. At Arizona State. I think that they've got a pretty good pretty good shot at it, but you need one of Washington State. I guess you need one of Washington State, UCLA, and Oregon State to fall your way, which I think
Yeah.
asking for one of those is not too much to ask.
Honestly, I'm looking at like 3.5, maybe 4.
Oh, really?
Like I see you beating Arizona, Northern Arizona. I see you beating UTEP, maybe Stanford, and then maybe Colorado. I don't think you
I would
beat
say
the other one.
definitely Stanford.
Yeah,
Oh,
like
I'd say
I might say
definitely
probably
Stanford.
Stanford, but then like maybe Colorado. But I don't think you beat Arizona State. I don't think you beat Utah. I mean, UCLA has to reload right with their quarterback and top wide receiver off the NFL, but I still believe in Chip Kelly and being success there. Oregon
Yeah,
State,
I think that's probably the least likely of them. But Oregon State having to travel all the way to the desert,
yeah,
I think there's a decent chance.
I,
DJU on the road.
I'm
There's a
expecting
chance for you to get
kind
that
of
one.
like a new life from DJ this year a little bit.
I think so too. Like I think that's the case. But I'm just saying like that is a game that he has not proved that he usually performs super strongly in. So,
Yeah.
um,
We'll see.
yeah, that one's one that I think is interesting. So excited to see what happens in the southwest corner of the nation. Other teams that maybe warrant a quick chat. Let's see here. Anyone else jump out to you?
I was going to talk about Colorado, and that's probably it.
Yeah, let me just give you two more that I like. These are not like slam dunks, but like real quick. West Virginia, that's a really interesting one. I don't know. I feel like they've been gutted by the transfer portal the last 2 years, so I might lean under there. Though I hope Garrett Green does great. He's a Childs High School alum. So their quarterback went
Yeah,
to our same high school, so pulling for him. But that one seems like an under. Georgia Tech, I think this is low. I think this is low for Georgia Tech.
you think
Um,
Georgia Tech's going to be better than they are, huh?
I think Georgia Tech's going to be better than that. Sorry, I'll run through their schedule real fast.
Well, they lost their quarterback, right?
They lost their quarterback, but they may have upgraded. They got Haynes King, the
The
Texas A&M
Texas A&M
starter. That
guy.
was, yeah, who was
That's true.
kind of handcuffed in Jimbo's system. Didn't let him be a playmaker and go around. And a big part of his game is running and making plays, and it wasn't able to do that there. Um, and they got a couple of other pickups that I think are kind of sneaky good. I don't have that right in front of me, but again, you're looking at 4.5. You've got here. I'll highlight the games that I think are winnable. Um, South Carolina State, I think that's probably a win. Home against the Bowling Green Falcons. Do I dare say at Miami as a winnable game? I'm
It
mostly
should have
joking
been
there.
last year.
I'm mostly joking there. They were very competitive in that game until their true freshman quarterback, who shouldn't have been playing, got injured in that game. Anyway, so I've got two. Boston College at home, I think that's a win. At Virginia, I think that's a win. And then home against Syracuse, I think is also a potential is a win. So I think there's a decent chance that they get that over at 5.
Yeah, I think it's a possibility.
Anyway, yeah, let's go. Let's talk to Colorado. Let's talk Colorado, and we can wrap.
Okay, so Colorado has a hard schedule in my opinion, but I feel like you don't know what this team is and you don't know what Deion's going to do. It's a little bit like can you go back and watch his JSU and say like this is going to be the same team? Like, I don't think you
I
can.
don't even think so because it's a different coordinator. Yeah,
Exactly,
they're a total mystery.
and that's what I think that they have going for them. Like, I think I I don't think it will happen, but I wouldn't be surprised if they surprise TCU like game one and just show up and like everybody's like, holy crap, and now Colorado's the talk. I think they could beat Nebraska. I cannot wait for that game because Matt Rule hates Deion and it's just kind of like watch how
Storylines
that
in that
goes.
one. That one's juicy for that reason for sure.
Yeah, but then like you play Colorado State, that's winnable. But then you play like Oregon, USC, Arizona State. Probably not going to be Arizona State, but then you play Stanford. That's a win potentially. Then you go UCLA, Oregon State, Arizona, and then Washington State and Utah State Utes. So it's a hard schedule, but I think you could find potentially more than 3 wins in that. If you're going to pick 3, it's got to be like Nebraska, Stanford, and then Colorado State. Don't you think?
Yeah, Colorado State definitely. Stanford definitely. Is it 3 or 3.5? Is there?
I think
What's
it's sitting
the
at 3.
current total? Sitting at 3. So yeah, then you get the push protection. You don't even have to. You don't even have to get that fourth. Yeah, I think one of the following 3 games is probably your best chance. I would say at TCU is probably not going to be an easy. That place is going to be, that's going to be a rabid environment after the heck of a season they had this last year. Going in there, season opening, they've got everything in front of them. So that one to me, I don't think is quite as winnable. Hosting Nebraska, I think is one that they got a shot at. The other
Mm-hmm.
one I would say, and I know this is going to sound like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, but like if you're looking for ones that for Colorado, hosting Arizona toward the end of the year, um, that might be a potential one. I don't know what the change in altitude is uh, between
Yeah.
Tucson and Boulder, but people say that has an effect. So I don't know what the change in altitude would be there. But maybe that's the only one. The back half I think is really rough. At
Yeah.
UCLA, home against Oregon State, home against Arizona. Again, I think is the most winnable. I wouldn't project them to win, but if you're looking for one, at Washington State, maybe the step down in competition, but that's a long, or it's on the road, and then at Utah, they're not winning. I don't think.
No, I
Um,
don't think so either.
so I think that those are the ones that you'd have to look for if you're trying to find
Well,
a way
and then by
a
that
path
point in
to
time,
go over.
teams will know who they are. You
Yeah,
know, because I mean, you got who got Charles Kelly running the defense, and then who's running the offense again?
Sean Lewis, the
That's right.
former
Yeah.
uh, Toledo head coach, is that right? I think it's Toledo, right?
Tulane. I don't know. It was one of the TU. But yeah, I'm interested to see how the season goes. It'll be exciting. So,
Yeah. Any kind of final thoughts or parting shots before we?
you made a comment about like you thought most coaches, the transfer exodus right after spring for Colorado is weird, and how most coaches are looking for transfers in. I feel like Deion used that either as like almost as like tryouts, like, oh, you guys are good
Oh,
enough to be on my team. You guys, bye. All right, we'll take in the next round
interesting.
of talent. We'll see how you are, and come fall practice. If we need to get rid of some of you guys, we'll get rid of some of you guys, and if we need to add a few more, we'll try and add a few more. Like, it's
No,
an
it's not a
interesting
bad.
perspective.
No, I think that's I think I mean that makes a lot more sense than kind of what I kind of was confused by that. That to me makes a little bit more sense. I've got the opportunity to evaluate that person over spring practice and decide, is that person able to contribute here at the level that we need, or no. Also, just a quick kind of follow up. Sean Lewis was the head coach at Kent State, not Toledo. Toledo's Jason Candle, um, who explored potentially doing the Miami job, but opted to stay at
Gotcha.
Toledo. So excuse me for that misspeak. No, that's interesting. That's the evaluation period basically, and if you're up to snuff, perfect, and if you're not, uh, find you a different home so I can have space on my roster to bring in someone who can contribute.
Yeah.
Um, Man, I don't have anything else. Did you have anything else? Otherwise, we'll wrap.
Um, the only thing I'm interested in seeing is come these summer months how recruiting shakes up, because you have a lot of recruiting visits in the middle of June, all throughout June, and then you have the dead period for a little bit, and a lot of people make those commitments, end of June, early July, whatever else, and so I think that's when we're starting to see how the full picture will be. I think you have a lot of teams really on the edge of like, can they have a great recruiting class, or are they going to have a terrible recruiting class? Like Miami. I mean, Miami could be great, or they could be terrible, and it'll be interesting to see if they can sell people on what they are. Because a lot of times you'd use your year to like try and get people to commit during the year, and like, oh, we're playing great ball, commit. And this, you don't have that anymore. It's got to, most kids are committed before their senior year of football, and they are going on. And so this next year won't really affect the next player. So we're going to find out the tail of the tape a lot, I think, in this next 4 months.
Yeah, that is interesting. I think there's a couple things that to me are surprising as that recruiting calendar has changed. One of them being like, with kind of the change in the early signing period, obviously players are making decisions quicker, opening up the official visit windows so that they can take those official visits in the summer, I think is obviously facilitating this quite a bit. But to me, the other part that's really interesting now, and this is new as of this year, is that now you can have more than 5 official visits. So here's what I suspect ends up happening with those types of teams, right? For the ones that have this, a dream season or a season that they would consider to be on par with where they need to be to kind of show the right trajectory, like nothing's going to happen. But if there's one of those that's all the rage and has a lot of buzz in the summer and it ends up getting a lot of commitments early on, and they've already used that sort of use that arrow in their quiver of the official visit during the summer, if they struggle during the year, and I'm a program that's doing well and has done my evaluations of some of those recruits, and maybe we weren't in that final 5 for that kid, but he ends up choosing a place that maybe has a down year, and now the coach's position or longevity is now in question at that school. I'm not suggesting specifically Miami, but like something like that where they have a lot of off-season buzz, generate a lot of commitments, and have a class that's really on paper is really strong, but maybe the season doesn't live up to expectations, and there's some of those seeds of doubt have been sown in players' minds. I might be able to circle back around and say, hey, you haven't used an official visit to us, and we're having a great season. Come here. I bet you that's where things get really wild, is in those last couple of weeks after the regular season has concluded, where you're going to see a lot of kind of I don't even know what the right word is for it, but just kind of like where programs will circle back to recruits that what?
Poaching.
Poach, yeah, sure, that's a good word for it. But just I would circle back if it's like, hey, you know what, recruiting at this position hasn't gone quite the way we wanted it to. We had some good conversations with this kid earlier before he committed to a school that maybe is now feeling like their coaching staff is on shaky ground. Let's just see if he's got any doubts. And if he does, like, come take an official visit to us because you didn't take one in the summer. That's where you're seeing most recruits take all of their official visits in the summer, at least 4 or 5 of them. When I say all of them, like historically you only had 5 to do, but many of them are taking that many in those. And once you visit a specific school, unless that school has a coaching change, you cannot revisit that one. So you can have as many official visits as you want, but they are to different schools unless there's a coaching change. And so that might be an opportunity for a team to sort of swoop in with a late official visit where the other team can't counter with their own, and potentially poach, like you said. I like that word. That's the right word. Poach some of those recruits at the 11th hour if maybe the season didn't go according to plan for the school that they initially committed to. I mean,
we may see the rich.
That's my hypothesis.
Yeah, no, it's a great hypothesis. We may see the rich continue to get richer because, hey, we had a good season. We're still rolling. Come on.
Yeah, or a team that surprises might be able to go swoop in and grab someone from a team that maybe was expected to do more and didn't quite live up to expectations. Anyway, I think that's fascinating. I'm glad that you brought that up just for a little extra tidbit there. I don't have anything else. Should we wrap?
Let's wrap.
All right. Before we do, the last thing, just for all of our listeners, if you got this deep into the show, number 1, thank you. Number 2, I don't know if you've been noticing, but on social, we're starting to get a little bit more active. So again, on Twitter, I've changed the handle. It's at CFBpaint_. On YouTube, you can go to youtube.com/CFBpaint. We've got a lot of shorts coming out there that are pretty kind of neat. A lot of those are the trivia questions, which we alluded to in our last episode. So feel free to stick around and pay attention to those. Instagram, we're at CFBpaint. That's our handle. Feel free to engage with us there. Write in if you have questions. We appreciate the question from Kyle, and we will see you next time. Thank you so much.